exceedingly beautiful. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
My little lad could draw. I thought he could read and write.
Constable.
Turner.
You're still making your nice little pictures, Mr. Turner.
She'd make a fine subject for you to paint.
Oh, is that so? I shall cogitate upon it.
When I experience a masterpiece such as yours, I'm struck by the clarity with which you have captured the moment.
Why on earth would he go and do that? He's ruined a masterpiece.
It's a boy.
Mr. Turner seems to have taken leave of form altogether. Turner.
Clearly losing his eyesight.
A masterpiece I here present, which Mr. Turner has just sent.
I believe you to be a man of great spirit and fine feeling. The universe is chaotic, and you make us see it. You are a man of great vision, Mr. Turner.
Well, I don't think you had anything in common with the other films we've seen. I think it certainly did remind me of Iceland, that's for sure. Just, it's just a treat to see that. It's just, the same question as always. How did you guys, your training, and how did you get started?
Okay, so I graduated in agriculture, and then went to work for a crazy sculptor just to earn some cash whilst I was looking for a grown-up job. And someone thought I'd said I'd graduated in architecture.
Agriculture, architecture,
yeah.
Both the A words.
So for about 3 years, I'd go, yeah, agriculture. And yeah, here we go. So I started, yeah, model making and sculpting, and suddenly it was like someone opened a door. It was, this is what I need to do. I didn't realise you could do it for a living. And I was treated like an apprentice, and before you know it, designers were asking me to build 60-foot dragons. I built a 60-foot dragon, and then I hand it over to the art department, to the shooting crew, and I wanted to know why I was building a 60-foot dragon. And so I just worked my way through the art department, and now I'm sat here with an Oscar nomination.
And I have to go apologize, Charlotte. I keep confusing you with Tatiana.
That's fine, we're friends, so it's
I'm
cool.
glad you're friends.
Yeah, we're good friends.
The same question.
Yeah, I grew up in London off Portobello Road, so sort of early start in scavenging and cheap deals. And then I went to art school and went to Goldsmiths, and I spent 5 years at art school and got into it that way.
I understand, which I just found shocking, that Mike Leigh's process involves developing the narrative during the rehearsal process.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the same time as you're prepping.
Yeah.
So you can't wait for the script. It just, you're developing it. So how is this must be really different than the way you both have worked on films before. Can you describe what that's like for us? A lot of us work in the business. We always have a script.
Yeah, you don't have that Bible. It can be quite daunting to start off with. But Mike makes his films this way, and he's made 20 films that way, so it works. So you basically have to give over to that and let go of your need for that sort of anchor point and join him in his discovery of his story. And it's such a joy to make a film that way, I can't tell you. Once you let go of that worry, you're absolutely a collaborative, creative part of his team, as are the cinematographer, costume, makeup. We all go through the same process. We all research it at the same time, and the actors as well. So each department is so crosses over into each element. So you sort of join in the discovery of this story that Mike wants to tell. And Mike knows his stuff, so he knows, like, when we knew we were going to make the Royal Academy, he sort of said, I might want to do a scene in the Royal Academy. So I went off and we had a research, and we worked out, okay, that's going to take a certain amount of time and it might cost a certain amount of money. And then Mike would say, how long do you need? You know, when do I need to let you know to get this? So if we're going to shoot in April, and I'd sort of say, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and he'd say, right, you're going to get 6 or 7 weeks, off you go, sort of thing. But on the whole, he's absolutely knows what effort needs to go in and respects every department and keeps you in the loop, because you are the loop, you're all part of it.
So it sounds, from a decorating point of view, you really have a lot of access to the actors and their process.
Yeah, working with Mike, you have really incredible access to the actors from very early on in the process. So when they're rehearsing and we're researching, and it's extraordinary because you go into this sort of small room, and often the actor's in character, and it'll be Susie, myself, Jacqueline, the costume designer, and Chrissy. And then they sort of tell you the story of their life, and you're allowed to ask them questions. And so we did that with Mrs. Booth and Turner's father, but we had this extraordinary improv situation with Timothy Spall, where, you know, he's a real bon vivant kind of actor, and he walked through this door as Timothy Spall and came out the other side as Mr. Turner, and he literally, like, physically changed. And he walked around Central School of Art, where we were working, and walked around the imaginary streets of London, and then sort of up to his imaginary front door, Queen Anne Street, hung his hat up, walked into his studio, rolled his sleeves up and started painting, and Susie and I just looked at each other and just went, and you could just see the studio just kind of arriving around him. It was quite an experience, yeah.
One aside, and then the question. I know from other people who've worked with Mike, he's got, who's an amazing storyteller, this propensity sort of being a bit of a voyeur. So there's that one scene in the Turner's studio where he's got the little peephole. Mm-hmm. Was that actually documented, or was that just a Mike signature thing?
That was actually documented. And the thing is, you know, we weren't trying to recreate a documentary about Turner.
No.
It was an inspiration of Turner. So there are so many anecdotes of that character that Mike sort of picked out little elements and then wove his narrative and his story, his characters through that.
Well, and so really my question, and there's two parts. There's the researcher part, because this is one of the few films you'll ever see where the researcher has a single credit up front, because it is so important, especially as we're talking about the improv, giving everyone the tools so they know how to step into that part of the world. You want to explain a little bit of that interrelationship?
Yeah, so Mike got this fantastic historical researcher called Christine Riding on board 2 years before we started shooting to basically be the phone a friend, the person who really was the font of all knowledge of that era, because we wanted to do justice to the era, but we weren't there to create a documentary. So we did spend a lot of time and effort with the researcher who, if she didn't know the answer, she had the doors to just about all the galleries in London and the UK. So we spent a lot of time, every department again, going off on your tangent of research to get the historical facts correct, and then you get to a point where you more or less throw that away because you have to then design the film with your instinct.
And your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And what was great about Jacqueline was that she understood that, because I think it could have been quite tricky to have a historical, very narrow view of it has to be like this. We knew what it perhaps was, but we weren't necessarily alive there, so we had to bring it to life, and there are certain things that we weren't sure of, but we went with the more visual ideas.
Was there a set or a moment at a time, was the time where you actually finally had that aha recognition that how you were approaching things with the knowledge that you accumulated was the right way to go with the show?
Yeah, and it sounds a bit strange. Basically, because Mike, the way he rehearses, we try and get the sets ready for him, for the actors to go and sort of live in for a couple of days or weeks before we turn over. So the first set that we filmed on was his house, Queen Anne Street house. So we dressed it completely so that the actors could go and inhabit that world for about 10 days before we turned over. And it's always quite a stressful moment handing the sets over to Mike. So
are you dismissed, or do you get to stay in the room?
You know, you walk round with him. You sort of, it's a show and tell. And it was on a Sunday morning. Charlotte and I dressed it so that we knew his angle of going into the room. So we literally had paint still wet, and you know, like cooking and literally like cooking happening in the kitchen, because it all has to be practical, obviously, with Mike. So we'd left it as if Turner had just popped out the room and his cleaner was perhaps outside, you know, doing the dishes or something. And it was early on a Sunday morning. He turned up, and I was like, oh my God, is this going to be okay? Walked him around, and he did this little thing where he claps his hand. He went, this is going to be a gas. And I thought, okay, we're all right, we're here, we're good. And that was the moment for me when I just thought, I think we'll be okay on this.
And that was your first set and your first time working with him.
First time on the major movie, yeah,
big movie.
yeah.
You know, one thing that I really enjoyed experiencing in the movie was your use of fabrics. You had the rough burlap on the Turner studio wall. You had sort of a green leafy tapestry stuff in his I guess, bedroom, and then the red silk walls in the gallery, and textile, really interesting textiles in Mrs. Booth's house. Can you talk about how those choices came about?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved textiles, so I suppose even as a kid, sitting on my grandmother's sofa, which was like orange jumbo cord with sort of crewel work cushions, I'd sort of love that kind of clash of sort of textures. And then I was kind of lucky. I worked in Australia with a designer, Janet Patterson, who did costumes and sets, which is quite unusual. And so I had this kind of quite amazing sort of education through her. And she really, taught me how to put it. But with Marianne, with Mrs. Booth, we wanted to make it like a sort of boarding house. And so we kind of, thought, crochet toilet holder type, nasty polyester. And we just kind of put that on a period drama. We just went pattern on pattern on pattern, unapologetically, yeah.
You succeeded.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Really, what's so great about your work on Turner, both of you, is the extent of detailing, as we're talking about, but also your ability to keep the story real and visually honest, and not falling into that trap of creating a precious or reverential historical biopic. You really avoided that so well. And so the question really is, what was real, what was a set, and how did you go around altering locations, because some of them were historically accurate, which you really, just like being in the woods, the Queen's Woods, you really can't do much unless you hide it all together.
And another thing that Mike prefers, that his way of filming is to film on location rather than in studios wherever possible, because he wants that composite set. So, for instance, his Harley Street house, we had to have he had to be able to turn up in a horse and carriage, get out, go through his front door, hang his coat up, go down, make a cup of tea, go to bed. It all had to be in the same environment so that the actors can inhabit that environment and believe it, and Mike can evolve his story and fine tune it. Although he'll have done it in rehearsals, he has the option to fine tune it. So all of them are composite sets wherever possible, and they are enhancements within houses. So the Royal Academy, we found a big old country house in Yorkshire that had a double height ballroom that we then built that set within it, and a few corridors. A lot of it was financially driven as well. I couldn't build the staircase and all the ante-rooms, but we've had a great location manager who enabled us to do a lot of builds within locations, basically.
Never talked about the paintings, so I guess we better.
You get the best.
What paintings? We were talking a little bit in the lobby about, because you had to have a half-built paintings and quarter-built paintings and almost done paintings, as well as copies. The copies, I would imagine you printed, but can you talk about those half-built ones?
So so we had over 350 paintings we had to reproduce. Some of them were going to be interacted with. So we were very lucky in that we got the copyright free from all of the major holders of Turner's work. I mean, we couldn't have afforded to do it, not a chance. So once they gave us the copyright free, they gave us high-res images that we then went through a painstaking process of working out how to make them look real. So we printed them on all sorts of different mediums and surfaces, eventually found the sweet spot, and had them all printed up to the correct size, and then we painted them all with a thick varnish, clear varnish, to make it look like it was nice thick oil. So that was all the sort of finished paintings. And then the ones that we see Turner working on, we had a fine artist do various stages of the Fighting Temeraire and all these other paintings so that Tim could interact. So I would say, you know, needed to be a quarter done, half done, or completely finished. And we had about 10 of those made for us.
Complicated.
Yeah, especially when you're kind of making it up at the beginning. How many paintings? Which ones?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Any
Cool.
other questions?
Beautifully done.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's very kind.
Imitation game, please.